The RMS Titanic lies beneath the North Atlantic in a shadowed hush, a vessel whose name has become shorthand for hubris, tragedy, and the fragile promises of modernity. Launched with fanfare from Belfast in 1911 and completed in 1912, she was billed as the most luxurious and technologically advanced ocean liner of her day, an unsinkable palace of steam and steel that carried with it the hopes of passengers and the national pride of an empire. Yet within hours of hitting an iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912, those assurances of invulnerability would be tested and found wanting. The ship's fate sealed by a convergence of human error, design assumptions, and unforgiving environment. Titanic represented both the apex of shipbuilding craft and a mirror of early 20th century social order. Her promenades, dining saloons, and staterooms were designed to emulate the finest hotels, while the lower decks held steerage passengers who traveled with minimal comforts and the urgent dream of new opportunity in America. The ship's architecture encapsulated both engineering confidence and social stratification, spaces designed to project permanence and progress amid an ocean that had long been a site of peril and wonder. In the months before departure, the White Star Line marketed Titanic as a triumph of comfort and scale. Her scale was indeed vast, thousands of tons of steel and a mechanical heart of boilers and engines intended for transatlantic schedules. The ship's safety features, notably her watertight bulkheads, reflected contemporary engineering thinking. Yet those features were not ignorant of limitation. The bulkheads could contain flooding to a degree, but their height and the complexity of potential damage scenarios meant that assumptions about survivability were conditional. When confronted by a series of ruptures along the starboard side, those conditionalities proved decisive. The collision with an iceberg occurred at a time when the Atlantic was unusually clear of sea ice warnings and wireless operators aboard. Other ships had transmitted ice reports that night. Radio operators aboard Titanic, occupied with personal and company messages, did not always ensure that every warning reached the bridge in a format that would alter navigational decisions. When distressingly clear icebergs appeared in the ship's course, the time available for full maneuvers was brief. Testimony later would focus on decisions taken at the helm, on watch-keeping arrangements, and on the interplay between speed and caution, an interplay that belongs equally to organizational culture and to the immediate judgments of individual officers. As water filled the forward holds, the ship's designers believed the watertight compartments could hold long enough for rescue or other emergency measures. But the bulkheads did not reach high enough to prevent progressive flooding. As one compartment filled, water spilled over into the next, and the bow began to sink. The crew sought to manage the crisis with the procedures they had, but the unfolding reality outpaced many expectations. Lifeboat arrangements reflected older regulatory frameworks. The boat capacity and drill practices had not matched the new scale of passenger vessels. As a result, lifeboats left with empty seats amid confusion on deck, and precious minutes were consumed by the logistics of lowering boats in darkness. Survivors' accounts of the night are vivid and variegated, mixing calm courage with panic and confusion. Some personnel, from musicians to engineers, performed duties to the end. Others sought loved ones in the degrading light. The ship's band famously continued to play as the decks heaved and the air turned colder, creating an image that would persist in memory as a sign of human steadiness in the face of collapse. At the same time, structural realities mattered. Locked gates and obstacles in lower-class accommodations impeded the movement of many steerage passengers to the boat deck, a tragic consequence of architecture and administrative practice that would shape the casualty profile. The loss of more than 1,500 lives on that voyage immediately reverberated beyond the ship itself. Families were fragmented, communities bereft of fathers, mothers, and children who had boarded in hope. The identities of the dead and the surviving were recorded in fragmentary ways that complicated closure for relatives. The legal and social aftermath was both immediate and far-reaching. Inquiries in Britain and the United States probed the causes and negligent acts, and a public debate followed about the responsibilities of ship owners, the adequacy of safety rules, and the character of modern progress. For decades, the wreck of Titanic was a conjecture glimpsed in sonar pings and rumor, a ghostly mark on maps of the deep. The technology needed to locate and explore such a site matured slowly, and initial efforts produced tantalizing but unconfirmed signatures. In 1985, an expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard in collaboration with French researchers used submersible technology and side-scan sonar to locate the ship lying on the ocean floor in two major sections, roughly 370 miles, 600 kilometers, south-southeast of Newfoundland and at a depth of about 12,500 feet, approximately 3,800 meters. The discovery transformed Titanic from a historical event into a tangible archaeological site and reignited global fascination. The wreck's division into bow and stern, separated by a debris field strewn with fragments of the ship and personnel. The effects told a violent story. The bow, relatively intact, settled into the silt with recognizable lines and fixtures, while the stern was a twisted ruin, its structure collapsed and its interior gutted. The debris field between offered a somber gallery of human detritus: boots, clothing fibers, letters, a child's toy, a broken plate, objects that anchored the abstract figure of loss to the intimate particulars of individual lives. Each artifact raised questions about preservation, ownership, and the ethics of recovery. Exploration of the wreck presents ethical and practical dilemmas. The deep ocean is not a neutral museum. It is a dynamic environment where corrosion, microbial action, and pressure slowly consume material. In early years, salvage efforts combined scientific curiosity with commercial interests, sometimes yielding contentious retrievals of personal items. These actions provoked debate over whether the site should be treated as a grave worthy of undisturbed respect, or as an archaeological trove from which historians might extract tangible links to the past. Subsequent guidelines and legal arrangements have sought to balance remembrance, research, and protection, tending to the site's dignity while permitting controlled study. The wreck has also become a laboratory for science. The cold, dark, and high-pressure conditions accelerate particular chemical processes while inhibiting others. Researchers have studied the degradation of iron in this niche environment and the role of specialized bacteria that consume rust and metal. Remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and manned submersibles have mapped the decks and catalogued the progression of collapse, enabling scientists to test models of structural failure that reconstruct how the ship broke apart. Forensic analysis of such evidence, rivet patterns, plate buckling, and fracture surfaces, has informed debates about material brittleness, assembly practices, and the shipbuilder's methods, contributing to an evolving understanding of the technical factors at play. The human scale of Titanic is perhaps its most enduring lesson. Photographs made before the voyage, letters that crossed the ocean unfinished, and oral testimonies that survived testify to ordinary lives interrupted, men and women whose biographies intersected for a single tragic night. The classed nature of the ship's layout meant the disaster's toll was uneven, exposing the vulnerabilities of those with the least agency on board. Yet the same historical record contains acts of bravery, generosity, and desperation that complicate simple moral narratives. Testimonies and artifacts together shape a story that refuses easy moral closure. The catastrophe prompted international reform. Public shock sped the adoption of stricter maritime safety measures,